Hello! Today, we're going to talk about a really simple but honestly super powerful idea in software design. It's called the component diagram. It's basically a tool for seeing the big picture, especially when you feel like you're lost in all the little details.
You know that feeling when you look at a huge project, maybe it's a big assignment for school or a new piece of software, and you just feel completely overwhelmed? That sense that you don't even know where to begin because the whole thing just feels like this giant, tangled mess?
Yep, we've all been there. It's a totally human feeling. And it makes you wonder, right? How do these huge teams, hundreds, sometimes thousands of engineers, build the incredibly complex apps that we use every single day? How do they create a streaming service or a social media platform without getting completely lost in all that complexity? Well, the secret isn't some kind of superpower that lets them hold all the details in their head at once. It's actually the complete opposite. You see, the best builders don't try to build everything at the same time. Instead, they learn to see the big picture as just a collection of simple, independent, and reusable building blocks. Now, in the world of software, these building blocks have a specific name. They're called components. And a great way to think about them is as a modular, replaceable part of a system. Modular just means it's a self-contained little unit. And replaceable, well, that means you can swap one out for a newer, better one without having to tear down the entire system. To make this idea really stick, think about a car wheel. It has one very clear job: to roll, and you can easily replace a flat tire, right? That's because it connects to the car using a standard pattern, the lug nuts. A software component like a login module works exactly the same way. It has one clear job: authenticate users, it can be updated, and, most importantly, it connects to the rest of the app through standard, predictable connection points. And that right there brings us to the most important part of this whole idea. These building blocks are only really useful if they can connect to each other reliably. And those standardized connection points, they're called interfaces. An interface is basically a contract. First, it defines what services the component provides to the rest of the system. In diagrams, you'll often see this shown as a little circle, kind of like a lollipop. It's just a simple visual way of saying, hey, here's a service that I'm offering. And of course, the contract works the other way too. The interface also defines what services the component needs or requires from other components in order to do its job. This is usually shown as a half circle, like a socket or a cup. It's a way of saying, for me to work, I need a service that fits right here. And this is where it all just clicks together. Imagine a profile page component. It has a requirement, a socket, waiting, because it needs to know who the user is to show the right information. Now along comes the login component. It provides authentication. Its lollipop fits perfectly into the profile page's socket. They connect. But here's the really beautiful part. The profile page doesn't need to know how the login component works on the inside. All it needs to know is that it provides the exact service promised by the interface. And that's really the heart of it. A simple, clean contract between two complex things. It's this separation that allows these massive, intricate systems to be built, and just as importantly, to be maintained over time without completely falling apart. So, if we zoom out, how does this all scale up to the big picture? Well, when you draw out all the major components of a system and show how their interfaces connect, you get what's called a component diagram. You can think of it like the master blueprint for the whole application. It's a way of thinking that scales all the way up to the modern microservices that pretty much power the internet today. Let's imagine a simple video streaming service, something we all use. Even just thinking about it, we can see some obvious building blocks, right? There's definitely a component that plays the video, another one to handle the comments, and probably a third component that recommends what you should watch next. A component diagram shows us exactly how these pieces are all wired together. So let's take a look at this map. We can see the recommendation engine provides a list of videos, but to do that, it requires the user's viewing history. That's a critical connection. Then the video player requires that video data from the engine. And the comments section down here, it requires user authentication before anyone can post. What this simple diagram gives us is a really powerful, high-level map of the whole system. We can see all the major parts and, more importantly, how they all depend on each other. This is so helpful for teams to decide where to focus their work and to understand how a change in one little spot might affect something else entirely. But really, this isn't about memorizing symbols or diagram rules. Learning about component diagrams is more about adopting a certain mindset, a powerful way of looking at any complex system. And sure, like any approach, it has trade-offs. It does require some careful planning, but the clarity it gives you is just immense. The goal of this whole mindset is to see the world not as a tangled mess, but as a system of interconnected parts.
It's really the skill of breaking down any large, overwhelming problem into smaller pieces. Pieces you can actually understand, manage, and solve one at a time. It's a super practical way to bring a sense of clarity to complexity, whether you're writing code or honestly planning any other kind of project.
The famous designer Charles Eames once said, "The details are not the details, they make the design." And that's exactly what thinking in components is all about. It's about recognizing that a great, huge design is really just the result of getting the small, simple parts right and then making sure they all connect to each other beautifully.
So I'll leave you with a final thought to take with you. What complex system in your own life, maybe a project, subject you're studying, or even a personal goal, what could you understand a little better right now just by taking a moment to see its simple, interconnected parts?